Marcus Kane had built his life on three principles: protect what matters, never look back, and stay invisible. For 8 years, he'd succeeded. The man the world once knew as a government operative had disappeared into suburban America, trading tactical gear for dad jeans and replacing his arsenal with soccer schedules and bedtime stories. His daughter Emma was 7 now, with her mother's dark curls and his steel-gray eyes. She didn't know that Daddy's business consulting job was a lie, that the scars on his back told stories of black operations across 3 continents, or that the basement safe contained enough weaponry to start a small war. Tuesday started like any other day. Marcus dropped Emma at Riverside Elementary, watching her backpack bounce as she ran toward her best friend Sophie. She turned at the entrance, giving him their secret wave. 3 fingers up, then a heart. He returned it, smiling at how such a small gesture could fill his chest with warmth. The morning traffic blurred past as he drove to his fake office, a rented space where he actually helped small businesses with legitimate consulting work. It was honest labor, something he'd never experienced before going underground. His phone buzzed with mundane emails. The stock market ticked upward on his computer screen. He microwaved leftover coffee and thought about Emma's upcoming birthday party. At 2:47 in the afternoon, his carefully constructed world exploded. The school secretary's voice cracked with panic through the phone line. "Mr. Kane, we need you to come immediately. Emma never made it to afternoon attendance. We've checked everywhere. The police are on their way." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. His training kicked in before conscious thought could catch up. He was already moving, his consultant persona shedding like dead skin. The drive to the school took 6 minutes. It should have taken 15, but Marcus Kane didn't exist in that car anymore. The man behind the wheel was someone darker, someone he'd buried but never quite killed. The parking lot swarmed with police cruisers and panicked parents. Marcus pushed through the crowd with controlled urgency, his eyes scanning, processing, calculating. Detective Sarah Chen intercepted him at the entrance, her face professionally sympathetic. She explained that Emma and Sophie had been taken from the playground during lunch recess. Witnesses reported a white van, no plates visible. Sophie's father, James Volkov, was a wealthy Russian businessman. The working theory was a ransom kidnapping targeting the Volkov family. Emma was likely taken by mistake, collateral damage in someone else's nightmare. Marcus listened to every word, his expression carved from granite while his mind raced through scenarios. Detective Chen assured him that Sophie's father had significant resources and would undoubtedly pay any ransom. The girls would probably be released unharmed once the money changed hands. She placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Standard procedure," she said. "These situations usually resolve within 48 hours. They'd set up a command center. The FBI was being notified. Everything possible was being done." Marcus nodded at the appropriate moments, played the role of the terrified but hopeful parent. Inside, he was already 10 moves ahead. As the detective walked away to coordinate with other officers, Marcus pulled out his phone. His fingers moved with muscle memory, accessing an encrypted app that hadn't been opened in 8 years. The screen glowed with a single contact, no name, just a number. He typed 4 words: "They took my daughter." The response came in seconds. Location. Marcus provided the school address, then added, "Find James Volkov. I need everything." His contact replied with a simple acknowledgement, then, "Going dark or going loud?" Marcus looked at the circus of flashing lights and officials who thought they were dealing with a simple ransom case. None of them understood what they triggered. None of them knew that whoever took Emma hadn't kidnapped the wrong child by accident. They'd awakened the wrong father. Marcus typed his final message. Loud. Very loud. Then he deleted the app, crushed the SIM card under his heel, and prepared to become the monster he'd sworn he'd never be again. James Volkov's estate sprawled across 12 acres in the countryside, protected by walls, cameras, and men with cold eyes. Marcus bypassed the front gate, approaching from the eastern woods where security was lighter. Getting inside took him 20 minutes. Nobody saw him enter. Nobody would remember him leaving. Volkov himself sat in a leather chair in his study, surrounded by 3 bodyguards, when Marcus materialized in the doorway like smoke given form. The bodyguards reached for their weapons. Marcus raised his hands, empty and open, but his posture screamed danger. "We need to talk about our daughters," he said calmly. Volkov studied him with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to control. He was 50-something, silver-haired, expensive suit stretched over a body gone soft with wealth. But his eyes held the cunning that had built an empire from Soviet ruins. "You must be Emma's father," Volkov said in accented English. "The consultant." The way he said consultant dripped with knowing mockery. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "You've been researching me." Volkov smiled without warmth. "I research everyone within 5 miles of my daughter. Your background is remarkably clean. Too clean. Nobody has that little history unless they are hiding something substantial." Marcus took 3 steps into the room. The bodyguards tensed, but Volkov waved them down. "I don't care about your secrets," Volkov continued. "The kidnappers will contact me within hours. I'll pay their ransom. Both girls will be returned. This is business, nothing personal." Marcus shook his head slowly. "You're wrong. This isn't about money." Volkov's smile faded. "Everything is about money." Marcus moved to the desk, leaning forward until their faces were inches apart. "Then why hasn't anyone called yet? It's been 4 hours. Professional kidnappers make contact within 2 hours to prevent exactly what I'm about to do." The room's temperature seemed to drop. Volkov studied Marcus with new intensity, seeing past the suburban disguise to the predator underneath. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Marcus ignored the question. "Someone took your daughter to hurt you. Emma was collateral, but whoever did this made a critical mistake. They gave me motivation." He straightened, his voice dropping to something colder than winter. "I need your resources, your contacts, your information network, everything you know about your enemies." Volkov laughed, but it sounded forced. "I have many enemies. That's the cost of success." Marcus circled the desk, his movements deliberate. "I'm not interested in your business rivals or political opponents. I need the names of people who would do this. People violent enough, desperate enough, or stupid enough to kidnap a child." Volkov's expression hardened. "I have the FBI involved. Private security firms. Why would I need you?" Marcus stopped at the window, looking out at the manicured gardens where Sophie probably played on sunny afternoons. "Because they operate within rules. I don't." The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Volkov stood, walking to a hidden panel in the wall. It slid open, revealing a safe. He extracted a folder, thick with documents and photographs. "There is one man," Volkov admitted, his voice tight. "Dmitry Kozlov. We were partners once, in Russia, before I came to America. He believed I stole from him. He swore revenge, but I thought time and distance had cooled his anger." He dropped the folder on the desk. 3 weeks ago, my sources reported he entered the country through Mexico. I increased security, but I thought he would come for me directly. I never imagined he would target Sophie." Marcus opened the folder, his trained eyes absorbing information at inhuman speed. "Dmitry Kozlov, former Spetsnaz, connections to organized crime, suspected in multiple disappearances across Eastern Europe." The profile read like a nightmare. "This man is a ghost," Volkov said quietly. "He has resources, connections. Finding him will be—" Marcus cut him off. "I'll find him. I'll find them both. But I need access to your security networks, your intelligence contacts, and complete freedom to operate." Volkov hesitated. "The authorities—" Marcus turned, his eyes blazing. "The authorities will find bodies or they'll find nothing. Your choice." The 2 men stared at each other, a contest of wills between different breeds of dangerous men. Finally, Volkov nodded. "My head of security will provide everything you need. But understand this, Mr. Kane, or whatever your real name is. If you bring violence to my doorstep, if you endanger Sophie further, I will make you regret it." Marcus picked up the folder, already planning his next 10 moves. "If I fail, you won't need to. I'll be dead." He headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. Kozlov probably has inside information. Someone told him about Sophie's routine, the school security gaps. Someone close." Volkov's face went pale. "You're suggesting I have a traitor in my organization." Marcus looked back, his expression grim. "I'm suggesting you trusted the wrong people. just like I did when I thought I could have a normal life." He disappeared into the hallway, leaving Volkov alone with his thoughts and his suddenly suspect bodyguards. Outside, Marcus's phone vibrated with a message from his encrypted contact. They'd traced unusual activity to a warehouse district 40 miles north. 3 vehicles registered to shell companies, heat signatures indicating multiple occupants in an abandoned factory. It was thin, possibly a trap, but it was all he had. Marcus climbed into his car, the folder on the passenger seat. Emma's face smiled at him from his phone's lock screen, taken last month at the beach. She'd built a sandcastle and declared herself queen of the ocean. He'd bowed theatrically, playing the loyal subject. Her laugh had been pure joy. Now someone had taken that joy and weaponized it. Dmitry Kozlov had made a tactical error. He'd assumed that taking a child would give him leverage, would make his enemies weak with fear. He didn't understand that some fathers don't break under pressure. They burn through it. Marcus started the engine, his face set with terrible purpose. The warehouse was 40 miles away. He'd be there in 30 minutes. And then the education would begin. The factory complex had been dead for 20 years, a corpse of American manufacturing left to rust in forgotten fields. Marcus approached on foot, his movements invisible in the darkness. The information from his contact had been accurate. 3 vehicles, heat signatures in the main building, and perimeter security that would challenge amateurs but barely slowed him down. 2 guards patrolled the exterior, smoking cigarettes and checking their phones, bored and careless. Marcus studied them from the shadows, noting the weapons, the communication gear, the way they moved. Not soldiers, criminals playing at military discipline. He disabled the first guard with brutal efficiency, a chokehold that left the man unconscious in 8 seconds. The second guard died before he understood the danger. Marcus's hand clamped over his mouth while a blade found the space between his ribs. It was mechanical, emotionless work. These men had participated in taking his daughter. Their lives had ended the moment they made that choice. Marcus dragged both bodies into the tall grass, taking their weapons and communication devices. The radio crackled with periodic check-ins. He had 15 minutes before their silence became suspicious. The main building's entrance was locked, but locks were suggestions of someone with Marcus's training. Inside, the factory floor stretched into darkness, broken only by light bleeding from offices on the 2nd level. Marcus moved like a ghost through the maze of abandoned machinery, his senses hyper-alert. 3 more guards on the ground floor, positioned to watch the approaches. Marcus's anger was a cold, controlled thing, a surgical instrument rather than a wildfire. He wanted to scream, to tear the building apart with his bare hands, but discipline held. Emma needed precision, not rage. The guards fell one by one, never seeing the death that took them. Marcus stripped them of weapons, ammunition, and information. A radio call revealed that the packages were secure upstairs, that the boss was expected within the hour. Dmitry Kozlov wasn't here yet, which meant Marcus had a window. He found the stairwell, ascending with his weapon ready. The 2nd-floor offices had been converted into holding cells. He heard voices, men laughing about something crude, the clink of bottles. 4 more guards, relaxed and confident. They'd never faced someone like Marcus Kane. The assault was surgical and savage. Marcus came through the door with violence that bordered on supernatural. The first guard took a bullet between the eyes before his brain registered movement. The second managed to raise his weapon before Marcus's knife opened his throat. The third died trying to radio for help, his message cut short by a bullet that shattered the device in his hand simultaneously. The fourth actually fired, his bullets punching holes in the wall behind Marcus, who moved with combat reflexes honed by thousands of hours of training. The guard's magazine emptied into nothing. Marcus's didn't. The silence after gunfire is always profound, a moment when the world holds its breath. Marcus stood in the carnage, his chest heaving, blood spray decorating his face and clothes. He was becoming the monster again, and part of him welcomed it. This was who he really was beneath the suburban costume. This was the truth he'd hidden from Emma, from himself. He moved through the offices, checking each room with mechanical thoroughness. Supplies, weapons, a table covered in surveillance photos of Sophie Volkov, her routes to school, her activities. But no children. Marcus's blood turned ice. The heat signatures had been accurate. People were here. But Emma and Sophie weren't among them. He'd killed 7 men and found nothing but confirmation that this was Kozlov's operation. His radio crackled with a voice speaking Russian. Marcus understood enough to catch the meaning. Status report. The buyer's getting impatient. Buyer. The word detonated in Marcus's mind like a grenade. This wasn't a ransom operation. Kozlov was trafficking the children. The full horror crashed over him. Emma wasn't being held for money. She was being sold. Every second he wasted brought her closer to disappearing forever into a network of monsters who traded in human lives. Marcus forced his breathing to steady, his mind to focus past the screaming panic. The guard's radio could be his next move. He responded in his broken Russian, trying to mimic the casual tone he'd heard earlier. All clear. Package secure. The voice on the other end paused, then replied with coordinates and a time. Midnight. The old marina. Dock 7. Marcus checked his watch. 3 hours. He had 3 hours to get to the marina, to find Emma and Sophie, to end this before the handoff happened. But first, he needed to ensure Kozlov had no fallback position. He moved through the factory with methodical purpose, gathering the surveillance equipment, the computers, anything that might contain information about Kozlov's network. Then he opened the fuel cans he'd found in the storage room and began spreading gasoline throughout the building. Fire would destroy evidence, but it would also send a message. As flames began to lick at the factory skeleton, Marcus stood in the parking lot, watching his work. The building burned with hungry orange light, smoke billowing into the night sky. Every criminal in the region would see this. Kozlov would know someone was coming for him. Good. Marcus wanted him afraid. He wanted him making mistakes. His phone buzzed with a message from his contact. Marina location confirmed. Multiple heat signatures. Heavy security. Boat scheduled to depart at 12:15. Marcus climbed into his car, the folder from Volkov beside him, now joined by weapons taken from the dead guards. The drive to the marina would take 90 minutes. Marcus pushed the speed limit, his mind running through scenarios, contingencies, possibilities. He was one man against an organization. The smart play would be to call in authorities, to let FBI agents with backup and legal authority handle the situation. But smart plays took time, required paperwork and approval chains and politics. Emma didn't have time. She had a father who'd once been one of the most dangerous men in the world, who'd killed enemies of the state across 4 continents, who'd made hardened terrorists weep for mercy. The highway blurred past, broken white lines like trace of fire in the darkness. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled force. He thought of Emma's face, her laugh, the way she'd hug him goodnight and whisper that she loved him more than ice cream. She was probably terrified right now, probably crying for him, wondering why Daddy wasn't there to protect her. The thought drove spikes through his heart. But he couldn't afford grief or fear. Those emotions made men weak. Instead, he channeled everything into the cold furnace of his training, letting it burn away anything soft or hesitant. The marina appeared on the horizon, its lights reflecting off black water like scattered stars. Marcus parked a mile away, approaching on foot through the marshland that bordered the facility. His boots sank into mud, insects swarmed his face, but he barely noticed. The dock stretched before him, a forest of masts and mooring lines. Dock 7 sat at the far end, where a mid-sized yacht bobbed gently. Men moved on deck, their silhouettes armed and alert. This was it, the end point. Marcus checked his weapons, his magazines, his knife. He was outgunned and outnumbered. The smart play was impossible, so he'd do the insane one. He'd give them exactly what they weren't prepared for. A father with nothing left to lose. The marina's security was designed to prevent theft, not invasion. Marcus bypassed cameras and motion sensors with practiced ease, moving through shadows like something that belonged there. The yacht at Dock 7 was called Serenity, a name that dripped with irony given what Marcus knew was happening aboard. 6 guards visible on deck, probably more below. The boat was meant for luxury cruisers, now perverted into a floating prison cell. Marcus could hear music drifting from the cabin, someone laughing about something vile. His jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. He slipped into the water 30 yards from the yacht, his weapons wrapped in waterproof bags strapped to his body. The water was cold, almost shocking, but Marcus barely felt it. He swam with efficient strokes, barely disturbing the surface, until he reached the yacht's hull. Hand over hand, He poured himself along the waterline toward the stain, where the swim platform offered access. A guard stood above, smoking a cigarette, his rifle slung carelessly over his shoulder. Amateur hour. Marcus waited, patient as death itself, until the guard turned away. The ascent was silent and swift. Marcus rose from the water like a nightmare given form, his hand clamping over the guard's mouth while his knife did its work. The body went into the water with barely a splash. Marcus was on deck now, water streaming from his clothes, his weapons unwrapped and ready. He moved toward the cabin entrance, his mind counting positions and possibilities. 6 guards visible, but his instinct screamed there were more. The buyer might already be aboard, conducting inspection of his merchandise. The thought made Marcus's vision narrow with rage. The cabin door was partially open, light and voices spilling out. Marcus peered through, cataloging the scene in microseconds. 4 men inside, weapons present but holstered, drinking vodka and playing cards. A doorway led deeper into the yacht, toward the sleeping cabins. That's where they'd keep the girls. Marcus made his decision and moved. The first man died with a bullet through his temple before the card in his hand fell to the table. The second managed to stand before Marcus's second shot took him in the throat. The third and fourth reached their weapons, but Marcus was already among them, a whirlwind of controlled violence that left only corpses in its wake. Gunfire erupted from deep in the yacht. Marcus dug behind the galley counter as bullets tore through the cabin. Wood splintered, glass shattered, the smell of gunpowder filled the air. 2 more guards emerged from the corridor, firing wildly. Marcus returned fire with surgical precision. 2 shots each, center mass. They fell, and the yacht went silent except for the ringing in Marcus's ears. He reloaded, his movements automatic, and advanced toward the sleeping cabins. Every instinct screamed that this was going too smoothly, that Kozlov wouldn't leave his operation this vulnerable. But Marcus had no choice. Emma was here. He felt it in his bones. The first cabin was empty. The second held surveillance equipment and weapons. The third was locked, still reinforced, a door that said something valuable was behind it. Marcus didn't waste time picking the lock. He fired 3 shots into the hinges, then kicked with all his strength. The door exploded inward, and Marcus came through with his weapon ready, prepared for anything. What he saw froze his blood. Emma and Sophie huddled in the corner, their hands bound, fear painted across their faces. But they were alive, conscious, unharmed. For a moment, Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the wave of relief that threatened to buckle his knees. "Daddy!" Emma's voice was small, broken, beautiful. Marcus was across the room in 2 strides, kneeling, his hands trembling as he cut their bonds. "I'm here, baby. Daddy's here. You're safe now." He pulled Emma into his arms, feeling her sob against his chest. Sophie clung to them both, shaking with terror. Marcus wanted to stay in this moment forever, to simply hold his daughter and promise that nothing would ever hurt her again. But the tactical part of his brain screamed warnings. Too easy. This was too easy. The realization came a heartbeat before the new voice. Touching. Really, very touching. Marcus spun, placing himself between the girls and the doorway, where a man now stood. Dmitri Kozlov was smaller than Marcus expected, compact and wiry, with dead eyes and a smile like a blade. He held no weapon that Marcus could see, but 6 more guards filed in behind him, assault rifles trained on Marcus's head. Kozlov stepped into the cabin, his movements casual. "You must be Emma's father, not the consultant. Something much more interesting." Marcus kept Emma behind him, his mind racing through scenarios. He was outgunned, outmanned, trapped, but his weapon was still in his hand, though pointed at the floor. Kozlov noticed. "Please, don't try anything heroic. My men have orders to shoot the moment you move. I'd rather not damage the merchandise, but I will if necessary." Merchandise. The word hung in the air like poison. Marcus spoke through clenched teeth. "Let them go. This is between you and Volkov. The girls are innocent." Kozlov laughed, the sound entirely without humor. "Innocent? There is no such thing. There are only the strong and the weak, the predator and the prey. Volkov is weak. He thought wealth would protect him, but money is just paper. Power is what matters. And taking his daughter, watching him suffer, that is power." He gestured at Emma. Your daughter, though, she was unexpected profit. When the buyer saw 2 girls instead of 1, he doubled his offer. You should be thanking me for increasing her value. The words were meant to provoke, to make Marcus act rashly. He understood the manipulation but felt the rage rising anyway, a red tide that threatened to drown his discipline. Who's the buyer? Marcus asked, buying time, calculating angles. Kozlov shrugged. Does it matter? Rich men with particular tastes. They pay well for young, unspoiled merchandise. Your daughter will live in luxury, really. Much better than suburban mediocrity with a father playing pretend at normal life. Marcus's finger twitched on his trigger. 1 shot to Kozlov's head. Then dive right, take out 3 guards before they could adjust their aim. It was suicide, but it would give Emma and Sophie a chance to run. Maybe one of them would make it. Maybe his daughter would survive to remember her father died protecting her. But even as he calculated the play, he knew it wasn't enough. The odds were impossible. He needed a miracle or a mistake. Kozlov stepped closer, sensing Marcus's calculations. You're wondering if you can kill me before they kill you. You're wondering if your death buys your daughter's freedom. It doesn't. My men have orders. If I die, everyone dies. The boat, the evidence, all of it sinks to the bottom, including the girls. The trap was perfect. Kozlov had engineered a scenario where violence failed, where Marcus's training and skills meant nothing. The Russian smiled at the recognition in Marcus's eyes. Now, I want you to drop your weapon. Slowly, then kneel with your hands behind your head. You're going to watch your daughter leave with the buyer. You're going to live with that image forever. And if you ever come after me again, I'll make sure you receive pieces of her in the mail until you beg me to stop. Marcus felt the weight of the gun in his hand, the promise of violence it represented. Every fiber of his being screamed to act, to fight, to die trying. But Emma's hand clutched his jacket, her small voice whispering, Daddy, I'm scared. The sound shattered something in him, broke through the operational coldness to the father underneath. He couldn't save her by dying. He couldn't protect her as a corpse. So Marcus Kane, who'd never surrendered in his life, who'd fought his way out of situations that should have killed him a dozen times over, did the impossible. He lowered his weapon. He prepared to kneel. And in that moment of apparent defeat, he saw it, the shadow moving in the doorway behind Kozlov's guards, fast and silent. Someone else was on the boat. The equation had changed. Marcus looked at Kozlov and smiled. You're right about one thing. Money is just paper, but you're wrong about power. His smile widened, feral and dangerous. Power is making your enemy think they've won, right before you destroy them. The explosion came from the yacht's engine room, a thunderous boom that rocked the vessel sideways. Kozlov's guards stumbled, their weapons swinging wildly as the deck tilted. Marcus moved before conscious thought caught up, his weapon rising, his shots impossibly fast and impossibly accurate. 2 guards down in 2 seconds, their bodies falling as Marcus grabbed Emma and Sophie, hauling them toward the cabin's small porthole. Hold your breath, he shouted, then shattered the glass with his elbow and pushed both girls through into the water below. The cabin erupted in gunfire as Kozlov screamed orders. Marcus dove through the porthole after the girls, bullets chasing him into the water. The cold was shocking, but survival overrode everything. He surfaced to find Emma and Sophie gasping, treading water in panic. Swim toward shore. Marcus commanded, but Emma's eyes went wide. Daddy, I can't swim that far. Marcus grabbed her, then Sophie, pulling them both with powerful strokes even as the yacht burned above them. More figures emerged from the marina, Volkov's security team, a dozen armed men rushing the dock. The explosion had been a diversion, a strategic strike by someone who'd been tracking Marcus's movements. His contact had provided more than information. They provided backup. The firefight on the yacht was savage, automatic weapons tearing through the night. Kozlov's men returned fire from a burning vessel, but they were trapped, their escape routes cut off. Marcus reached the dock and hauled both girls onto the wooden planks, his lungs burning, his body running on pure adrenaline. Get them to safety. Marcus shouted at Volkov's men, who immediately surrounded Emma and Sophie, creating a human shield. Emma reached for him. Daddy, no, don't leave me. Marcus cupped her face, his hands shaking. I love you more than anything in this world. But I have to finish this. I have to make sure he can never hurt you again." He kissed her forehead, tasting salt water and tears, then turned back to the burning yacht before his resolve could crack. The vessel was dying, flames consuming the luxury facade to reveal the skeleton beneath. Marcus could see figures moving on deck, silhouettes against the fire. Kozlov was trying to escape in an inflatable raft. 2 guard with him, their weapons firing at Volkov's team. Marcus found a rifle abandoned on the dock, checked the magazine, and raised it to his shoulder. The distance was 30 yards, the targets moving, the wind gusting off the water. He exhaled slowly, feeling time slow the way it always did in these moments, and fired. The first guard dropped, his body tumbling into the water. The second took a bullet through the shoulder and fell back into the raft. Kozlov looked toward the dock, his eyes meeting Marcus's across the distance. Even through the smoke and chaos, Marcus saw the recognition there, the understanding that this wasn't over. Kozlov raised his own weapon, firing wildly, bullets stitching the dock around Marcus. But Marcus didn't flinch, didn't move, his rifle steady as stone. The second shot took Kozlov in the leg, spinning him around. The third caught him in the chest as he tried to raise his weapon again. Dmitry Kozlov fell backward into the burning yacht, disappearing into the flames that consumed his empire. Marcus lowered a rifle, his body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Around him, Volkov's men were securing the area, restraining the surviving guards, calling for emergency services. The yacht was sinking now, the flames hissing as they met the water, smoke rising like a funeral pyre. It was over. Emma was safe. Sophie was safe. The nightmare had ended. But as Marcus turned back toward his daughter, he saw Detective Chen emerging from a police cruiser, her face a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Behind her came more officers, their weapons drawn, their attention focused on Marcus. He understood immediately. He'd left bodies across the city, burned a factory to the ground, turned a marina into a war zone. There would be questions he couldn't answer, truths he couldn't reveal without exposing everything he'd buried. His life as Marcus Kane consultant was over. The moment he'd chosen to save his daughter, he'd destroyed the fiction he'd built. Emma broke free from Volkov's security and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You saved me. Daddy, you saved me." Marcus held her tight, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, knowing what came next. Detective Chen approached slowly, her hand on her weapon but not drawing it. "Mr. Kane, I need you to come with me. We need to talk about what happened tonight." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. "I know. But first, I need to see my daughter safe. I need to know she's going somewhere secure." Volkov stepped forward, his expensive suit replaced with tactical gear, a rifle slung over his shoulder. He looked different now, less businessman and more soldier. "She'll come with me. With Sophie. My estate is a fortress. Your daughter will be safe there while you handle the legal matters." Marcus studied him, looking for deception, but found only grim understanding. They were alike, these 2 fathers, both dangerous men trying to protect what mattered most. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. He knelt down, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red from crying, but she was alive and whole and more beautiful than anything in the world. "Emma, I need you to go with Mr. Volkov for a little while. Be brave for me, okay? I'll come find you as soon as I can." Emma's lip trembled. "Are you in trouble because of me?" Marcus shook his head firmly. "Never because of you. You're the best thing in my life. Everything I did tonight, I'd do 1,000 times over. But Daddy made some choices a long time ago, and now I have to answer for them." Emma hugged him fiercely. "I love you, Daddy. More than ice cream." Marcus felt his throat close, his eyes burning. "I love you more than the ocean, baby girl, more than all the stars." He stood, watching as Volkov's people led Emma and Sophie to armored vehicles. His daughter looked back one more time, giving him their secret wave. 3 fingers, then a heart. Marcus returned it, his hand steady even as his world crumbled. Detective Chen gestured toward her car. "We need to go. There are a lot of people who want to talk to you." Marcus nodded, allowing himself to be led away. He didn't resist when they cuffed him, didn't protest when they read him his rights. What would be the point? He'd made his choices with open eyes. He'd chosen his daughter over his freedom, her life over his comfortable fiction. And he'd make that choice again without hesitation. As a police car pulled away from the marina, Marcus looked back at the burning yacht, at the smoke rising into the night sky. Somewhere in that fire, Dmitry Kozlov's body was turning to ash, along with his trafficking operation, his criminal network, his power. Marcus had destroyed it all, burned it down to save one little girl who called him Daddy. The government would want answers. They'd want to know how a suburban consultant had moved and killed like a special operations veteran. They'd dig into his past, uncover the operative he'd been, demand explanations for why he'd disappeared and who would help him vanish. Let them dig. Let them question. Marcus Kane had learned the most important truth of his life tonight. You could run from your past. You could bury your skills and pretend to be someone ordinary. But when everything you loved stood on the edge of darkness, you became exactly who you needed to be. He'd been a weapon for his country, a tool to be deployed against enemies of the state. Tonight he'd been something far more powerful. He'd been a father, and that was a force more terrifying than any training, any government program, any tactical expertise. The police car drove through the gates of the marina, leaving behind the chaos and carnage. In the rear-view mirror, Marcus caught a glimpse of his own eyes. They were the same steel gray that Emma had inherited, but now they held something new. Not the emptiness of the operative he'd been, not the cautious hope of consultant he pretended to be. They held the fierce certainty of a man who'd found his purpose, his line in the sand, his reason for breathing. They'd taken his child. They'd made the fatal mistake of thinking he was helpless, of believing he was just another suburban father. They'd been wrong, and they'd paid the price. Detective Chen glanced at him from the front seat. The FBI will want to know everything. Who you really are, who you worked for, how you knew how to do what you did tonight. Marcus met her eyes in the mirror, his expression carved from granite. Then they'd better have a lot of time. It's a long story. She nodded slowly. I imagine it is. For what it's worth, you saved those girls. Whatever else happens, you did that. Marcus looked out the window of the passing streetlights, watching the city blur past. I saved my daughter, he corrected quietly. The rest was just necessary. The federal building loomed ahead, its windows dark except for a few lit offices where people worked through the night. Marcus knew what waited for him inside. Interrogation rooms, federal agents, lawyers, and prosecutors who would pick apart every moment of the last 12 hours. They'd want to understand how a ghost from their own past had resurfaced, how someone who'd been erased from official records had suddenly painted a trail of bodies across their jurisdiction. But Marcus wasn't afraid. Fear was for people who had something left to lose. As they pulled into the underground garage, Marcus's phone buzzed one final time before Chen confiscated it. A message from his contact, the ghost who provided information and backup when it mattered most. The girl is safe. The father did what fathers do. Some debts are now paid. Stay strong. The message deleted itself immediately, leaving no trace. Marcus smiled slightly. He called in favors tonight that had been owed for years, burned bridges he could never rebuild. But Emma was alive. That was the only currency that mattered. The interrogation lasted 3 days. Federal agents rotated through in shifts, their questions relentless, their tactics ranging from sympathetic to aggressive. Marcus told them nothing they didn't already know or couldn't prove. Yes, he'd killed men at the factory and the marina. Yes, he'd acted outside the law. No, he wouldn't reveal his former employers or the nature of his previous work. Some secrets were sealed with blood, protected by oaths that superseded courts and judges. The agents grew frustrated, then angry, then resigned. They had a man who'd saved 2 children from human traffickers but left carnage in his wake. The legal questions were complex, the political ramifications messy. On the 4th day, Marcus received a visitor he didn't expect. The man was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He carried no identification, announced no agency, but the federal agents vanished the moment he appeared. Marcus recognized the type immediately, someone from the deep bureaucracy, the layers of government that didn't appear on organizational charts. The man sat across from Marcus in the interrogation room, studying him with calculating eyes. "You've created quite a problem," he said without preamble. Marcus returned his gaze steadily. I saved my daughter. If that's a problem, I'm not apologetic. The man's expression didn't change. 7 dead at a factory, another dozen at the marina, property damage in the millions, international complications with Russian organized crime, and at the center of it all, a man who supposedly doesn't exist. He leaned forward. You were one of ours once. Black operations, deniable assets, the kind of work that never sees daylight. You did good work, and then you vanished. For 8 years, we looked. Now you surface because of a kidnapping. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. My contract was completed. I fulfilled my obligations. What I did after was my business. The man nodded slowly. Technically correct. You served your term, took your payout, and disappeared cleanly. We assumed you'd ended up dead in some foreign gutter. Instead, you built a life, had a child, tried to be normal. He paused. That was naive. Men like you don't get to be normal. You should have known that. The words stung because they were true. Marcus had known, on some level, that the past would find him eventually. He'd just hoped for more time, more years of Emma's childhood before the reckoning came. What happens now? Marcus asked. The man stood, walking to the one-way mirror, studying his own reflection. That depends. The story we're releasing is that Dmitry Kozlov was killed during a multi-agency operation targeting human trafficking. You're being credited as a confidential informant who provided crucial intelligence. The bodies you left behind become casualties of the operation. Messy, but legally defensible. Marcus felt suspicion coil in his gut. Why would you do that? Why protect me? The man toned, and for the first time, something like emotion crossed his face. Because you did the right thing. You could have called the FBI immediately, let bureaucracy and procedure handle it. But we both know that would have taken time. Time those girls didn't have. You went dark, went operational, and brought them home. That counts for something. He moved back to the table. But there's a price. There's always a price. Marcus had expected this. Nothing in his former world came without strings attached. What do you want? The man pulled out a file, setting it on the table. Every few years, situations arise that require particular skills. Deniable operations, surgical solutions to problems that can't be solved through official channels. You spent 8 years pretending to be civilian. I'm offering you a way to make that real. Work for us again. Not full-time. Just when we need someone who can do what you did at that marina. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrible. Marcus thought of Emma, of the life he wanted to give her, of school plays and soccer games and teaching her to drive someday. Then he thought of the reality, that men like Kozlov existed, that children disappeared every day, that the world needed people willing to walk into darkness. How often? Marcus asked quietly. The man shrugged. Maybe twice a year, maybe less. You maintain your civilian life. We provide legal protection, financial support, everything you need to stay invisible. When we call, you answer. When we point, you shoot. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the choice. He could refuse, could face trial in prison, could lose Emma to the system while lawyers argued over his fate. Or he could accept, could remain free but forever tethered to the violence he tried to escape. I want guarantees. Emma is off limits. If I do this, she never gets pulled into operations, never becomes leverage. Her safety is absolute. The man nodded immediately. Done. Full protection for your daughter. New identities if necessary, relocation assistance, the works. She'll be safer than the president's children. Marcus opened his eyes, meeting the man's gaze. He'd learned tonight that you couldn't outrun what you were, couldn't pretend hard enough to make the fiction real. He was a weapon, honed and sharpened by years of brutal training. He could either rust in prison or serve a purpose. At least this way, Emma would have a father. At least this way, other children might get saved. One condition. I choose the operations. If it's not saving innocent people, if it's political or corporate or any of the dirty games you people play, I walk. You want me operational, then I operate on my terms. The man considered this, his expression unreadable. Finally, he extended his hand. Deal. You choose the missions. We provide support. And your daughter never knows what Daddy really does when he disappears for a few days. Marcus shook the offered hand, feeling the prison walls of his old life closing around him again. But at least this time, he was choosing to walk into the cage. At least this time, he had something worth fighting for. The paperwork took another week. Lawyers crafted narratives, judges signed sealed orders, and Marcus Kane, the consultant, became Marcus Kane, the confidential government asset. He was released on a rainy Tuesday morning, escorted to a black SUV that drove him directly to Volkov's estate. Emma met him at the door, launching herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her face buried in his shoulder, and cried with relief so profound it broke his heart. "You came back," she sobbed. "I was scared you wouldn't come back." Marcus held her tight, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances. "I'll always come back to you, baby girl. Always. I promise." They stood there in the doorway for long minutes, father and daughter reunited, while Volkov watched with understanding in his eyes. The Russian knew what deals with the devil looked like. He'd made enough of them himself. Sophie appeared behind her father, healthy and whole, her trauma beginning to heal. The girls had grown closer during their captivity, bonded by shared nightmare. They'd need therapy, would carry scars that might never fully heal. But they were alive. That was the victory Marcus clung to. Later, after Emma finally fell asleep in his arms, exhausted from emotion, Volkov and Marcus sat in the study with expensive scotch neither of them really tasted. "They gave you a choice," Volkov said. "It wasn't a question." Marcus nodded. "Work for them or face prosecution. Easier to make me useful than deal with a legal mess." Volkov swirled his glass, studying the amber liquid. "I received a similar offer once, many years ago. That's how I ended up in America. Some prisons have better views than others, but they are still prisons." He looked at Marcus. "Your daughter will never know. That's important. Let her believe in the good father, the hero who saved her. Don't let her see the monster behind the mask." Marcus felt the words cut deep because they were true. He was a monster, had proven it at the factory in Marina, but he was Emma's monster, and that made all the difference. "Thank you for protecting her," Marcus said, "for keeping her safe while I dealt with the aftermath." Volkov nodded. "We're fathers first. Everything else is just survival." They drank in silence, two dangerous men united by love for their daughters, understanding without words the bargains they'd made and the prices they continued to pay. The next morning, Marcus took Emma home to their suburban house, which looked exactly as they'd left it. The neighbors asked concerned questions about the family emergency that had taken them away. Marcus smiled and lied smoothly, falling back into the role of normal father with practiced ease. Emma returned to school after a week, her therapist reporting good progress. The nightmares would fade eventually. Children were resilient. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, homework and dinner, television, and bedtime stories, the comfortable routine of normalcy that Marcus now understood was both precious and fragile. 3 months passed before the phone rang with a blocked number. Marcus answered already knowing what he'd hear. "We have a situation in Oregon. 3 children missing. Suspected trafficking network. Local authorities are overwhelmed. We need you." Marcus looked at Emma doing her homework at the kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked through math problems. She was safe, happy, healing. Other children were in darkness, waiting for someone to find them. "When do I leave?" Marcus asked. The voice on the phone gave him details. A flight tomorrow, equipment waiting, intelligence briefing en route. Marcus hung up and walked to Emma, kissing the top of her head. "Daddy has to go away for work for a few days. Uncle James will stay with you." Emma looked up, worry flashing across her face. "Is it dangerous?" Marcus smiled, keeping his voice light. "Just boring consulting stuff. I'll be back before you know it. And when I get home, we'll go for ice cream. Double scoops." Emma's face brightened. "Promise." Marcus crossed his heart. "Promise. I love you more than the ocean. Remember?" Emma grinned, returning their secret wave. "I love you more than ice cream, Daddy." Marcus held that image in his mind. His daughter's smile, her innocent joy, her complete trust that he'd return safely. It would sustain him through whatever darkness waited in Oregon, through whatever violence he'd need to deploy to bring lost children home. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Marcus went to the basement and opened the safe he'd hoped never to access again. The weapons gleamed in the fluorescent light, clean and maintained, ready for use. He selected what he'd need, checked magazines and sights, his movements automatic and precise. The man who tried to be just a father put on the mantle of the operative once more, becoming the ghost who walked through walls and left only bodies behind. Marcus Kane packed his gear, arranged coverage for Emma, and prepared to disappear into another nightmare. Because that was a bargain he'd struck, the price he paid for his daughter's safety and his own freedom. Some fathers coach Little League. Some help with science projects. Marcus saved children from monsters, becoming a monster himself to do it. He'd learned the hard truth that night at the marina. You couldn't escape what you were, but you could choose what you fought for. The next morning, Marcus kissed Emma goodbye, watched her board the school bus, and drove to the airport. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed a suburban father in business casual, but behind his eyes lived something darker, something necessary. 3 children in Oregon needed a hero. They were about to get something better, a father who understood exactly what was at stake, who knew the terror of having a child stolen, who would burn the world to ash before letting another parent feel that pain. Marcus Kane had been many things in his life: soldier, operative, ghost, father. Now he was all of them at once, a weapon with a heart, a monster with a purpose. And somewhere in Oregon, the people who'd taken those children had no idea what was coming for them. They'd kidnapped the wrong kids. They'd awakened the wrong father. And soon, they'd learn what every criminal eventually discovers, that the most dangerous man in the world isn't the one with nothing to lose. It's the one protecting everything he loves.